Hey everyone. I know we're going to see each other in a matter of hours, so I'm going to be brief with this final lecture, but I just felt like showing up, saying hi one last time because there are some things I just want to explain a little bit before we leave the semester. First of all, it's been great. I got to say that all the responses that you have turned in have been really well researched. Barring some like little rhetorical notes that I have for some of you, um, the writing is just like it's where it needs to be. It's on point. You guys are doing what you need to do. So thank you very much for that. It's been great to hear what you think about these readings and how you make sense of them because that helps me make sense of them in more complicated, complex, and thorough ways. So I appreciate your input. Um, so what I want to talk to you about today is essentially my response to the conversation about contemporary art and Schenectady, New York, and then also I'm going to talk very briefly about the cache number five. Um, so which I haven't seen or looked at or even really acknowledged many of the responses that have probably come in. So I'll look at those over the course of the week and talk to you, email you, and have all those conversations as need be. So, but here I am talking, and around me is an installation view that is the contemporary artwork that I chose. And sorry for that awkward transition, but I'm just kind of running through this um, so we can really be done with this semester. We're almost done. So, Schenectady, New York, is for me a film that I think can best be described in a term of in terms of scale or scaling. This is a conversation that I was reminded of actually with a few of your colleagues and one of my colleagues, one of our colleagues, um, a theorist named Ramzi Fawaz, who was talking about it in relationship to reading. And when so everyone has access through common language to text, and the way that we identify with the text, the way that we identify with the author of that text and their story is through um, uh, personal reads or our personal ability to connect. Now, how does that relate to our conversation this term? Well, think about it as relative to those positionalities that we've been describing. If you share certain positions or even certain spectrums that you or certain proximities to places on those spectrums. So, like if you can understand what the author says. I'll finish one sentence before I start the next. So, to restate that, um, positionality is all about essentially intersectionality and where the spectrums of our existence correspond or intersect, right? And so we have, say, a spectrum of gender, a spectrum of sex, a spectrum of nationality, a spectrum of language, and all of those things intersect at a certain point that give us our positionality. That's covering what we've already talked about. Um, and so, with regard to scaling and the issue of dealing with other authors and other authors' perspectives, we can think about it in terms of when those one of or multiple lines intersect at the same place. So if you share in common English as a language, you can access an author's text. If you share in common a kind of visual vocabulary, you can access an artist's production. If you share with that person, say, female identity, you might be able to relate to the work in a certain way. You can, to use the word scale, you can scale in. You have more access to that information because you have more access to the position that the author had. If you share more than one intersection, say you are female and a person of color, and you are reading a book that is by, say, Toni Morrison, I think was the example that Ramzi Fawaz was giving. Um, and you can access that text even more because you have more in common with the author. This isn't new. We understand this. And that's how we kind of find the work that we appreciate, find the work that we like, is we find work that we quote unquote identify with. And all of you have done a really awesome job at finding work that not only you identify with, but also work that falls within your aesthetic vocabulary and that challenges you. I'm really, really impressed by the contemporary artists that you all chose. And I have also been like really, uh, it's really great to I like read through your list, and I've actually seen a couple of those artists starting to get quite a bit of press, which is awesome. Like, good looking out. Um, Being a cultural eye is something that we don't really talk about, but um, that it's it's nice to like pin somebody and say, oh, I like that work, and then you see them as they become successful. Um, I That's what I like to do with my students. Use you for your fame. Um, so all scaling and all of that kind of stuff as a relationship to one another is an important thing to understand as an author, as a studio production, as a studio producer. That's the word I'm looking for. Um, so how does post-humanity come into this? How does the work of Charlie Kaufman and the film Synecdoche, New York, which I've heard from some of you, you all really liked, or some of you really liked, so it's great, so good. Um, well, the way that Kaufman tells the story of Synecdoche, New York, is through this idea of scaling. We meet a maker, we meet a character, and then we are given access to another part of his person, another um, uh, path that we can find an intersection of. Spectrum. Those are the words I was using earlier. So we can find a spectrum for this author, and so we can learn more of him. But also, and this is why I think it's such an interesting film and such a good one for this conversation. We see him actually scaling into his own self and finding complexities, nuances, but also, and this is in, kind of just the point of that film, we find actually how reliant he is on other people's understandings and the constructs of culture that exist around him. He takes the cities that he knows, and they become him and become extrapolated in his head to much grander spaces, to spaces of much bigger possibilities. But those possibilities are all internal interscalings. So it's at one point very big and very external, but the film itself is, as I'm sure you all were able to really, I mean, it's jarringly personal and internal and introspective, and this push pull of having um, relying on the network of the everyone, and also um, really intensely critiquing who we are as individuals and who we are as makers as individuals, because that's a really important part of obviously an MFA program. So that film that blew my mind when I saw it, and it continues to blow my mind every time I see it. So I'm happy to share this kind of culture with all of you. Um, Now, how does it relate to a work of contemporary art? While doing my gallery walkthrough a few months ago, I stumbled into Green Neftali Gallery for a show, the title of which is on the back wall there, the exhibition. It's called Orlando. Now, this show by Trisha Baga is a show that's very technologically heavy. Um, Generally, I'm suspicious of shows that require a certain level of technological interfacing, only because I worry that it's a lens that's too difficult for many viewers to get through. But I'm over that. I'm over caring for everyone's access to all kinds of culture because, um, well, you pick and choose the culture that you want to intersect with. So I don't want to intersect with football ever again. So I'd rather go into these spaces and just say, okay, Trisha Baga, you want me to put on 3D glasses? I will put on your 3D glasses. And I did, and it was really, really rewarding. And so, to kind of shift the conversation from scaling and Charlie Kaufman's Synecdoche, New York, into Trisha Baga's Orlando and the notion of post-humanity um, is a really appropriate switch, and it's going to be really easy when you see a little bit more of how this show functions. So, the way that I have come to define post-humanity uh, is that we as a culture, we as a human animal have actually become so distanced from the animal, the Homo sapien that we are, that we do not have a natural link to our animalian self. I don't know if animalian is the right word, but our animalistic self, our kind of eternal thing. The first means where this breaks down is in the introduction of language. We learn a much more complicated language than any other animal that we've been studying. Other animals have language. We understand this. Whales, dolphins, the great apes, bees. There's lots of different ways that animals communicate, and they communicate in complex ways. But we've developed much, much, much more complex ways because our language is taken from audio into textual, into a variety of different other technologies. Every technology we develop is a development of our language and the way that we can use that language to describe the world. And so a photograph is a document of language, right? Because without language, we would not have the technologies of photography to capture the world. So it's an extension of language. Post-humanity and a lot of the other ways that I think about the world is in this language camp, but you guys know that about me. So we, by walking away from the animal side of humanity and walking towards the linguistic side of humanity, is the switch from human to post-human. Because what happens with post-humanity is we exist in at kind of a meta level of being. We wake up, we have biological functions, all of us. We need coffee, we need water, we need food, we need sleep, we need exercise, we need all of these things. Yes, but we do all of these things without, say, the fear of predation or of being the prey to a predator. We do all of this without, by and large, within the confines of, say, the safe, secure, and or the first world. We can say that we lack a certain pressure to really fear for our lives on the regular, the way that every animal does. The squirrel just keeps running outside of my window here. That squirrel negotiates with a variety of different predators every day and thinks about its world in those kinds of quick snippets. We as humans have distanced ourselves from that, therefore we have entered into the phase called post-humanity. Now, that said, some of you might be listening to this saying, that's not the definition of post-humanity that I came to. That's fine. Post-humanity is a very new theoretical term. It's one that involves quite a breadth of discourses, and within that breadth there is this nuance for each of us to glean pieces of information and present our own ideas on post-humanity. And in conversations with some of you, I know that your definition of post-humanity is different from mine, and what I'm saying is that's totally cool. It's like we're two people on a panel on post-humanity talking about it from different perspectives. So, um, so all that is to say, I walk into Trisha Baga's exhibition and I'm presented with an English text that tells me to put on 3D glasses to experience the videos. Fine. It was so much worth it, so much more worth it than I was anticipating. Because what you can see here on this screen is a projection that looks like it's kind of grainy. What you can barely see is this arc here and a head, and then this little orange triangle here, which is a beak, and then this little dot there is an eye. It's a peacock. The 3D glasses help make sense or help us negotiate the various screens that Trisha Baga's work, Orlando, deals with. There is a screen of reality, which is the light that's projected onto the wall. There is a screen that's legible without the glasses, which is this highly pixelated aerial shot down on a small piece of land. So it's like maybe a square of about um, several feet by several more feet. Um, and it's pixelated. With the glasses, we can see yet another screen, and that screen brings together the images, these grainy images of peacocks that are actually eating pieces of seed and food that exist on this plane. So we're looking above at peacocks that are going around having their lunch. And so I walk in and I'm seeing this and I'm immediately really into how the graphics look because it feels, to use some of the words that Pablo Helguera uses in his text, which I haven't talked about that much. It's really just a vocab book for new art, and I think he does a good job of explaining them. So um, I like that this is a very de-skilled operation. You walk in, you're given really, really cutting edge. I mean, these were nice 3D glasses. You're given these 3D glasses, and I mean, nice. They're like $100 probably, but still, it's nice enough. So you're given these 3D glasses and you're given new technology, but you're given it in a way that's similar to Jacoby Saderwhite's work that I showed over the summer, or tried to show over the summer, where it's about actually relaxing the hand and saying, I'm not going to give a fuck because I'm going to give myself instead. And for Jacoby, that means kind of sketchily making digital worlds because it matters more that he's voguing on point than that the world around him is decorated to a perfect single point perspective. For Baga, the work is about our ability to see all of these different layers at the same time. If she had done the James Cameron perfection, where you put on the glasses and all of a sudden you feel like you are in the Avatar, cool. That's one option, and that's the option that is really designated into entertainment or into a certain kind of storytelling. But what de-skilling does, or hacking, as some body artists or performance dance-based artists have referred to it, is the it's what happens when you decide to put the idea of perfection down for the sake of allowing your different intersectionality or your different positionality to present its own ideas or its own take, its own very idiosyncratic and specific take on these ideas. And you can de-skill everything. You can de-skill painting, you can de-skill carpentry, you can de-skill digital animation, which Baga is doing, but you can also de-skill ceramics. And that's the thing that really sold this show to me. Like, A, I'm really into ceramics this term for a lot of reasons. But B, to walk in and to see, okay, I'm dealing with light projected on a wall, then vision number one, glasses, vision number two, all of a sudden we're confronted with three different realities. And one's real and two are the simulacra. And then you turn and you see all of these various, very de-skilled, very hacked, very anti-aesthetic, not perfect ceramic replicas of our contemporary world. Here's another image of the seed, which takes the shape of an image of a person, and then this peacock head. The peacock heads, I forgot to mention, are digitally animated. And here you have some of the ceramics work. There's peacock. Oops, sorry, clicked the wrong thing. Um, Seeds. And as you move through the exhibition, you find another screen. Well, here, I'll just click ahead and find. Yeah, that's right. That was a tortilla and a DVD player. Okay. So this is an image that allows you to see um, a few different de-skilled replicas. So this is, I'll explain what they are first. So down here we have a ceramic typewriter. Obviously it doesn't function. It's a shell that looks like a typewriter. The simulacra, the simulation of a typewriter. Over here we have the simulation of a computer, a screen, and a keyboard, also made out of ceramics. And down here, and this is my favorite, it's this kind of shout out to the Normcore, two Crocs, like the shoes, Crocs, also made out of ceramics. Everything you see here is made out of ceramics. This little shelf is where you put the 3D glasses down. So you kind of walk into this space. Let me see if yeah, okay. So here's the next video room. So you walk into this space, the peacocks are projected on the back of this wall. You see all these various things. The Crocs and the computer are over here. This is the typewriter. And here is this other screen with these really cool, also advanced technology chairs. So there's like some sound vibrations that happen in those chairs, which are pretty cool. Typewriter, keyboard. Okay. So you're sitting in these chairs. It's very similar to the video that's in the front in that there's a variety of different screens giving us a variety of different realities. All of them are actually filmed with a camera, so all of them are actually representations of our world. The peacocks here are photographed, they're not digital animations. But you can see, even in this image, that there is superimposed on top of this other image something that looks like a screen grab from a cell phone. Here are these various chairs. Ooh, they're the Crocs. And this is some of these stills from this video. So here we have the peacock. You can see the images of the peacocks. But she shot peacocks eating the food and then animated peacocks into the food as well. I forgot to mention that. But so what happens here is you're watching this thing and it flashes through these different worlds, and you get to one where this scientist, who may or may not be Trisha Baga. I saw an image of Trisha Baga, and this feels like it could be her if she was making herself into something that was kind of supremely dorky, dweeby. Look at that lab coat. You probably make so much money. I'm kidding. She's an artist. But anyway, sorry. You're all going to make lots and lots of money as artists. I know, because you're all smart. So what where this person is standing actually in front of a green screen. And again, advanced technologies played with, de-skilled, hacked, as it were. And so you're watching this film, and at various moments, things begin to, the screens are acknowledged. Our ability to kind of zoom in or scale into this text and say, okay, I've been in a pool, so I can identify with what this is. I can put my own body and my own self in this likeness, is then cut short by the outlining of various points, because we now feel pushed back. Our ability to access, our scaling in is cut short, and we are pushed out of it. And this happens at multiple times. So you're watching this person, and then all of a sudden they turn around, and then the screen behind them changes, and they turn back around. And so you were identifying with them, say, filling out a survey, taking notes in a mall atmosphere, and all of a sudden you are no longer with them. They're no longer with you, because they're no longer in the place you thought they were in. They're in this other place. This other place has changed. But again, like Synecdoche, New York, the changes all reference the known world. In other words, to link it back to the idea of post-humanity, it's all about, it all still is connected to humanity. That's why it's not the next thing. That's why that's why we still use the word humanity in this conversation. Because like Synecdoche, New York, and here this project Orlando, we are the glitches that cause us to question our own reality, our lived experiences, are in these works. They're not based in some sort of science fiction or some sort of fantasy land where there's dragons and fire and all this other stuff. Instead, it's so much more about our feelings and our emotional registrations of the world around us. And both of these projects, Orlando, not only this film but also the full exhibition, as well as Synecdoche, New York, really ask us or demand of the viewer that they make relationships to places, to characters, but allow those relationships to be hyper flexible, very, very scalable, to use that word. So we can zoom in and be next to the character in Synecdoche, New York, having a conversation with him, and then we can zoom out and see that he's in this monstrous soundstage with a variety of different cityscapes being built all the time, ever grander, ever grander. In this situation with Orlando, we're in the space, we're looking at the artwork, but our ability to access the spaces that are the worlds, as it were, that are in these videos is cut short by the use of green screen, the use of a multiplicity of digital projections overlaid onto one another, but then also turning around and seeing the ceramics works. You know, when you see the simulation of something as benign or banal as a crock, it it helps echo the full space. Now, the last thing I'll say before this goes on for a half an hour, because I do want to. Well, it's going to be about 45 minutes, maybe an hour today. Sorry. Um, but anyway, had I walked into this show and just seen ceramic crocks and a ceramic computer and the simulation of our world or useful things in clay, I would not have been moved. I would not have been interested. I've seen that before, and that's the only reason why I wouldn't have been interested, because it's a little too undergraduate. It's experimental. It's quippy. Had I walked in and seen just the play of superimposition on green screen videos with the use of these fancy glasses, would I have been impressed? Maybe. Um, could it have gone really drastically the other way and I could have been bored to tears and hated the show? Yeah, probably. I'm kind of on the fence with a lot of those things when it's just about like just digital and just cool technologies. Um, but having them together, having the handmade simulacra with the digitally produced simulacra made the show the one piece of contemporary art that I think best relates to these conversations and these discourses. And yeah, I mean, I kind of walked into the space, saw the show, thought about the show, left, and ultimately it resonated with me in a way that I'm still trying to put together. So that's cool. And so the last thing I will say about that is when putting together your projects, putting together your works, one option isn't necessarily to add another thing, thereby making said thing more complex, quote unquote, because that's not always the case. Sometimes when you add things, it just gets bigger. What you can do is de-skill is one option where you challenge the perfection of what you're producing so that the viewer has a different relationship to it. Um, but that's one option, and I just like using the word de-skill, and I'm seeing a lot of you find ways to use it. So I would like for you all to get this word into your vocabulary, specifically Jose. Jose. De-skill. De-skill. Or hack. Hacking's cool too. I like hack. It reminds me of the 90s. Um, de-skilling. That's one option. When you add something on, it just gets bigger. The other option is to analyze the same project and present another tiny piece of it in conjunction with it. So whether Trisha Vaga approached this work with, I want to make simulacra crock out of ceramics, or they approach the work to say, I want to produce a video that's the simulacra with green screen, digital animation, and 3D glasses. But ultimately, the decision was to incorporate both of those things because it essentially establishes a nice parenthetical. Trisha Baga's exercise, her experiment, her, to put it in terms that are relative to our time together, her show, her exhibition, her thesis, is benefited by having both options. Just like in the film Synecdoche, New York, our ability to connect with a very personal characterization by Philip Seymour Hoffman is offset or balanced out by the breadth and the crazy digital complexity that was the internal dialogue that that character was having. So now we're going to switch and go through Cache 5 real quick. Whoops. You caught my coffee mug. Okay, Cache 5, all of us others. Um, so identity politics is at a point where it's not actually about, how do I say this? Identity, we are in a tough spot, y'all. Like a really, really tough spot. I know I'm probably not alone in saying that the events of the last, really over the course of our term, have just been so destabilizing. The violences in this country and in other countries, the rhetoric, the fascism. I mean, it's very, very frightening. And one of the things that um, I have known for quite some time, and I'm starting to figure out ways of negotiating it into my classwork, is that the way to have a conversation about identity politics is actually to identify that all of us are A, intersectional beings, B, evidence of the same set of intersectional um, indexes or indices. In other words, we all have a gender, we all have a race, we all have a nationality, we all have a language, we all have political preferences. We all have all of the things that intersect to that make a position, that make a positionality, that make us intersectional beings. And rather than say that there is a mainstream, then that there is this like ridiculous farce that sociologists like to refer to as the norm, I like to think that there is absolutely no norm. The human animal is the norm, but with a conversation of post-humanity, culture has bastardized that. We are all effectively brothers from another mother, and in that we need to all be able to stand up, or not stand up. We don't need to stand up anymore. We need to be sitting down and having lots of calm conversations across peaceful dinner tables that allow everyone the ability to say this. All of us, others. We are all evidence of uh, of otherness. And the more that we understand that, the more that we digest that and move forward with that, the easier it's going to be to actually achieve any kind of cultural step forward. Uh, Basically, what that means is the mainstream, if you want to abide by or like see a continuum from 1950s culture that actually bankrupted the entire world and well, whatever, the 1950s, I don't need to get into them. Um, so we had the norm in the 1950s, which was like letter jackets and cheerleaders and the like that dumb the fodder for R.L. Stine novels. Uh, but the and you had the abnormal and the Jack Kerouacs, the Beat Generations, the Beatniks, they would turn into the hippies, they would turn into the punks, they would turn into the da 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 da. We can see that chain going all the way down. Um, but what actually happened at around the end, by the end of the 1990s, is that everyone was in such a small camp that every camp became a subculture. The letter jacket cheerleader R.L. Stine fodder camp, the prep kids, the Ken and Barbies, or whatever you want to refer to those that embodiment as, that became a subculture because there wasn't as many of them. They weren't everybody. Um, the punk kids weren't everybody, so they were a subculture, but they kind of knew it. And just speaking from personal experience, what I started to realize was that these two camps needed to actually just acknowledge that they were both subcultural, but they were both fine. There's no need for these two camps to ever, like, I didn't get beaten up because I was different than the people that were playing lacrosse and on the cheerleading team and all that other stuff, because they existed and me and my friends existed. And so, yes, it's a utopian vision that we're all going to get along forever, because that's total crap. But ultimately, all of us are others. And the way to link this to some of the readings from this week is to think that otherness is about hybridity. Hybridity in the sense that hybridity is about both disidentifying with certain aspects, like there's certain aspects of the American identity that I disidentify with. And it's not to say that those are political. It could just be the fact that I don't like football. Football is largely the culture that connects sports, is the culture that connects more American citizens than any other thing other than language. More people watch football than they vote. More people watch football than they really do anything than cook. Um, I don't I don't do that football thing. And so I disidentify with a certain portion of that, and I identify with, or I perform an identity that exists outside of that, or that is different than that. And so what we're going to, what this cache was set up to do, and I'm just going to like pull the wool out, is to say that yes, you were supposed to be comparing two sets of artists at a time. And those two sets are the NSK with their Passport project, as well as John Rubin and Don Waleski's Conflict Kitchen. So that was one comparison between NSK and Conflict Kitchen. The next comparison was between, Josephine McSepper and the work of Nick Mouse. And the last one is the work of, really the oeuvre of Juliana Huxtable, and also of Ryan Trecarton and Lizzie Fitch. So we'll start with NSK and Conflict Kitchen. And just for the sake of time, I'm just going to run through these pretty quickly, just because I want you to understand what I was thinking when I was putting these things together. And so I'm going to be looking down and just reading some of my footnotes. For the first comparison, compare and contrast the following two projects. Well, from my eyes and the research that I've done on these works, I've heard NSK speak to the pitfalls and the triumphs of the Passport project. It was really, what a fascinating collaborative team of artistic producers. One of whom is Ada Kufer, who is affiliated with this program. I hope at some point that you will be able to meet Ada, but she at times is not in the country. So, and I have not heard Rubin or Waletsky talk about Conflict Kitchen, but I have heard secondhand, and I've known the project for quite some time. So both of these artists, or both of these teams of artists, and the collaboration here is really important. So that's kind of goes without saying. So the artists here are doing what I think, or I identify as three different things. The first thing is their impulse is to mitigate trauma. So there is a trauma to the xenophobic discourses within the United States. That is because even in this globalized and smaller world that we live in today, America still exists in between two really big oceans. And the fact that we don't deal with Latin America or don't deal with Spanish speakers except to refer to them in really derogatory terms in contemporary culture is A, problematic, and B, racist, but not a conversation for this class. But because America is where it is, we are buffeted from actually interfacing with directly interfacing with the kinds of violences that are enacted in other parts of the world more routinely. And with Conflict Kitchen, what Rubin and Walewski have set up is a food kitchen that is designed um, to present the conflicts that the United States is embroiled in, in, whatever, um, and essentially just see food as a way for an American in Pittsburgh to identify with an Afghani in Kabul. And so they'll bring the food culture, obviously not all of the culture, but they'll bring the food culture to Pittsburgh where this project exists. It actually has existed in a variety of different iterations. It might not actually be in Pittsburgh anymore. I know Rubin is at CMU, but I'm not sure if Conflict Kitchen's still there. I think it is. I should click the image for more information, but I'm not going to do that. So that idea is to establish a conversation and therefore mitigate trauma. With the NSK Passport Project, they actually were trying to establish a means by which the passport as a model for internationalism could be challenged. And they began this project, and really quickly, as I'm sure some of you found in your research, people who were seeking asylum found this passport project through the internet, through the globalized world that we've been interfacing with over this course through the internet right now. They were able to, or they actually became a place where people would apply for passports. And this turned into them actually giving passports and finding a way to guarantee safe passage for people who are asylum seekers. This project has ballooned and become a variety of different things. And so ultimately what NSK was trying to do was trying to mitigate the trauma that was that surrounds getting a passport or passing through a border. The second thing that they were interested in doing, or that they did, was they co-opted the standard cultural platforms by which we understand cultural exchange. So we all, in a passport-driven world, know that if we want to travel outside of the border of the United States, we need this little book. And NSK knew that, and as a method of critiquing that institution, they decided to co-opt it, take it, appropriate the book, appropriate the format of the picture, of the paperwork, of all of it, appropriate all of that and present it as a cohesive sum in this project. Rubin and Walewski, their appropriation is that of a restaurant. They understood that we like foreign food, but for some reason, so many Americans are afraid of foreign people. Maddening. It's crazy how many people will like eat Chinese food and then be mean to a Chinese person that doesn't speak English the way that we want them to. I almost said correctly, but that's not the word to use, because that's the word that's inappropriate. Because if I could speak Chinese, I'm sure I would fumble quite a bit. It's about patience, people. But anyway, so Rubin and Walewski identified that, okay, people are going to the Syrian restaurant, which they are, but they won't look at or identify the humanity of a Syrian person. And so Conflict Kitchen brings these two conversations together in a way that is comfortable for the audience. Oh, you like falafel? Help these people. And the last thing they do, and this is the important thing, is they garner an exchange in place of conflict. Or where conflict exists, these artists try to establish a connection. Within the post-human world, language makes this possible. Language has made this entire operation possible. Language is the thing that establishes borders and the thing that thereby necessitates a passport, which is a document of language that helps you, allows you, through common meaning, to pass through these borders. Food, a table, has a lot of cultural connotations to it, for certain, but these, in this world that is globalized, it's not unlikely to have an immigrant population that opens a restaurant in the United States. It's actually how a lot of immigrant populations sustain themselves and introduce themselves to new neighbors, to their new neighbors. It's great when that happens. Um, and so, in place, instead of this conflict, instead of xenophobia, they're breaking bread. Instead of denying asylum seekers this option, NSK actually changed their project so that they could allow for this international travel to be part of the work. Now, the words that I said quite a lot during that little piece, but also in my notes, are borders, exchange, and conflict. Now, at this point, those are the three words that allow you to negotiate the rest of the artist, or this entire cache. And so when you get to the work of Josephine McSepper uh, and and also Nick Mouse, the ideas of border, exchange, and conflict are turned into formal and metaphorical positions. And the thesis for my read of these two projects, or their interrelationship, is the mirror as metaphor and the place of hybrid interchange. The mirror becomes a border between the work and between the artist, the work, and the audience. There's always, the work of art always establishes that border. You make a thing that encompasses an idea, you put it into the world, and it becomes the edge of your idea. And then someone comes into the space, they see that thing, it becomes their edge as well, and it becomes the location of conversation. So every work of art, this happens. The author and the audience meet, and there's a thing that's in the middle, and that thing is called a piece of art. For McSepper and Mouse, what they're interested in doing is using the mirror, or placing the mirror in this position of the object to excite, not challenge actually, to excite that place of exchange, to give the audience a little bit more of themselves back. So what I see that doing is it implicates the viewer for certain. What you can't really see, how did they do this picture? I guess they're just tucked behind somewhere. But this the backsplash of this vitrine is mirror. And McSepper, in paintings and in these sculptural vitrines, embeds quite a lot of mirrors. McSepper also embeds advertising materials, which I'm sure you found when you did your research into the artist and their work. And so you walk up and you see these things that are advertising materials, and you're familiar with them, and you know them as a cultural world, and you begin to read collage. And so, like Trisha Baga, what McSepper is doing is presenting you with quite a lot of information, quite a lot of varying layers of making, of artistic ingenuity and ideas, and also of appropriation. And that's not like a sign for appropriation, that's just what my hands did. So you walk in and you're confronted with a lot of stuff that you know, including a mirror image of yourself. And so you're there, but you're also here. And so you become in two places at once. And that gives you an identifiable means of exchange with the viewer, because or the author, the artist, because they are also in two places at once. McSepper isn't in the gallery with you, but the ideas that McSepper is mining are. You're in the gallery, and your ideas are also in that same place, the work of art. So it becomes this place of exchange, this place where post-humanity and language finds its border and also acknowledges the porosity of that border. And I think the use of mirrors between both of these artists' work is that's the reason why I chose these two artists, but that's also why I'm just kind of fascinated by the varied and vast uses of mirrors in contemporary art these days. Um, I've seen a lot of mirror shows, and no one ever does it right. I don't know why. But for Mouse, and I'm giving you this image, which is obviously the same work of art, but I'm standing in such a position that I can take the picture, showing you the mirror with the audience in it, without actually putting myself directly in the mirror part of the image. But if you look closely, you can see the halo of my head and my hairline, and my hair looks like crazy bad right now, but hey, whatever. Um, so this mirror it's like a net, um, and it's this net that captures all of this information, but it captures it only for a specific user at a specific time, and that is not necessarily a direct metaphor for anything like the internet, but it's certainly there. And I want to make this under an hour. So the mirror implicates the viewer. The mirror is the place of hybrid interchange, or it's where the two ideas come together, like I was just saying, but I'm repeating myself now. So it psychologically displaces the border, which I find really interesting, which is similar to what the NSK passports did for the when to hear the artist speak on that project, they talked about meeting these people from various parts of sub-Saharan Africa who wanted to use the NSK as the asylum-seeking route. And what they realized when they met these people was that they the people saw this as the potential of displacing of that border. If we can meet in this place and we can find a common ground, the border between us can be evaporated to a certain extent. We can identify a porous point that we can reach through. The liminal space is really what I'm getting at, where we can reach through and access both sides. A mirror in these two situations, Mixupper and Mouse, does a little bit of both. It allows you access because you see your body, but it also denies you a certain access to, say, the artist's body and the artist's intent. Now, for Mixupper, it's negotiated by employing a lot of other appropriated things, like a painting, an object, a photograph. For Mouse, it's slightly different. The mirror is a blockade between the rest of this work, which we can't see because it's tucked behind the composition, which is of the mirror, right? So we actually demand so much more attention from this work than the artist is allowing us. Like, we get a bigger space. The mirror is bigger than our access to the drawing. And the last thing it does is it establishes an immediate conversation or an immediate platform for exchange. We are exchanging with these artists at this time. Okay, so compare and contrast the following two projects. So these two projects are Juliana Huxtable's recent project at MoMA, and also, which is that, and Lizzie Fitch and Ryan Trecarton's videos. So one of the things, the thing I have written here is what a queer theory can bring to the table. These projects dislocate polarities and therefore dislocate borders between those polarities. There is a very intense inter-object exchange, which I'll have to, I don't even know what that means. Scratch that. That doesn't make any sense. And holistic, interconnected sensate. So it's a sensate world, and I'm using sensate in the sense that Robert Hobbes was using it, where there's a porous network of information that we all access. So the idea of disidentifications, the idea of a queer theory, but more importantly than disidentifications is the Cyborg Manifesto. And so I guess the inter-object exchange does make a little bit of sense, since that's a very materialist thesis by Haraway. Um, Donna Haraway's Cyborg Manifesto, and I said this during critiques, but I'll reiterate it now, is the essay, or is the time period when we switch rhetoric from a feminist discourse of radicality and um, of kind of subcultural identity politics into one that is called queer theory. Queer theory, the way that I understand it, the way that I propel it out into the world, is um, is as a verb, as an action. Queer is, you queer a system. It's queering. A body can be queer, yes, but I think it makes a lot more sense if we see it as a locus of radicality, a place where there is always a question. There is always a moving target. There is always an unknown, and ultimately what that yields is there's always a surprise. There's always mystery. There's always a bit of play. A bit of play is really important with these two artists' work, and a bit of and always quite a bit of performance, as a means of understanding all of this. So, oops. Um, oops, sorry. Bogad. Um, so one of the things that I like about, well, that's a horrible thing because you get this dumb Dior ad. Never mind. We're gonna ditch that. Go up to this. Click on this one and talk about a MoMA. Juliana Huxtable. Um, I've been trying to figure out how to embed Huxtable into this conversation. Oh, whatever. Never mind. We'll just work from this. The Huxtable is, um, they're effectively a nightlife celebrity. They DJ, they throw parties. They're in New York City, and they're just they kind of came out of a rebirth of club kid culture, which I know several of you in the class are negotiating with, playing with. Like, what does it mean to be gay, subcultural, and born at the end of the like, not born, but um, heavily dealing with culture at the end of, or the turn of the millennium, um, which is what yields this rehash of club kid culture. But one of the things that Huxtable said in a lecture I heard them give was that history is cosplay. History is cosplay. I can't remember a single thing other than that one blip of a soundbite. Oh, history is cosplay. History is a place where it's a position. And all of a sudden, it just like came flooding back to me. I was like, okay, that's how I'm going to bring Huxtable into this conversation. It's in the conversation with Trecarton and Lizzie Fitch, who's here, Center Jenny. I hope you all had the chance to watch. I'm sure you all, some of you are probably like, after Synecdoche, New York, you're like, I don't know how to do with this. I don't know what to deal with this. But I think there's a lot of similarities between the kinds of cinematography and camera work, but also the depth and scaling that Kaufman employs in Synecdoche that Fitch and Trecarton definitely use in this project. But one of the things that links these two is this idea of costuming, of putting something on. The putting on of a thing is an action, and if you put on a thing that doesn't culturally fit, then it becomes a queering of that history. And a lot of the things, or the way that I understood what Huxtable's project was, I couldn't actually go to see it, I'm sorry to say, but my understanding is that it is about the intersection of American history and the body that does not fit into American history. But instead of saying that my body, I'm speaking as Huxtable now, my body as an intersex human, me does not fit into the not only the gender binary but the racial divide that is American history and is the American narrative. So if I want to be identified as an American, I need to put on American history as a mode of cosplay or costume play. In the same way that Comic Con ralliers put on the costume of their favorite comic book character or video game character. It's just about saying, learning the full breadth of what that characterization is. What does it mean to be an American? And and picking out the signifiers and putting them on, playing with them. And so for Huxtable, that comes in a variety of different shapes. In this, it's the reading of poetry with music and also some other scripted performance in there as well. But for Fitch and Trecarton, it's actually employing quite a bit of people to scale out. So Huxtable scales in. It's about their position, it's about their world, it's about their body and their body in the cosplay of American identity. For Trecarton and Fitch, they're scaling out. They're taking one idea and they're extrapolating it, giving it a variety of different embodiments, all of them potentially the same Jenny, all of them different Jennies, all of them no Jenny, but actually the construct of the building they exist within, was Trecarton and Fitch talk about as a living thing. And so all of these characters live in this house, and the house becomes tantamount to Huxtable's history. We inhabit a building, we inhabit a history. We put these things on, and we can also move out of them. We can pass between their borders, but we make that decision. Now, that idea of agency over these kinds of decisions and over these kinds of politics, over these kinds of kind of dispositifs or these apparatuses of power and authority that we exist within, is coming directly out of queer theory. It's by identifying a body as a queer entity, as an entity that's kind of amoebic, that can dance and float in and out of various buildings, histories, dispositifs, costumes. That body is one that's agential or has agency. And as such, we as an art viewer can see these things as means of potential exploration outward. After I heard Huxtable talk about history as cosplay, my relationship to American identity, to American history, to art history, to art history professorships, very, very quickly changed. And I began to, it was so much more, I was more equipped to critique the histories that I present because I saw them from a very objective standpoint. In the same way that when you're in a building, you identify that you are not the building. I'm not that wall. I'm not that ceiling. I'm not that floor. I'm a body inside of that system. I'm a body that can leave that system. And with something like, uh, an NSK passport, I can leave a border and transpose. With something like Conflict Kitchen, my body can look at the system of the United States international relations and take myself out of the conflict to enjoy a meal and consider the conflict objectively. From these, in both Mauss and McSepper's work, it's about announcing an objectivity both between the object and us, the viewer. And so all of these works in this cache, and ultimately this class in full, is about you coming to terms with exactly not just what you identify as, but also how that identity can be taken off, examined, looked at, exploited, explored, exploded in a variety of different ways that allow you the ability to speak more confidently, not just from your position, but to other positions. You're never going to be able to be at another position. You're never going to be anything that you are not. But you can become so much more well versed and expansive with where you are. And I'm really happy to have heard in studio visits and in critiques, but also read that a lot of the ways that you all as a class are negotiating these texts are they're challenging. You're challenging your understandings of these ideas. You're challenging my understandings of these ideas, and it's been really great to see that um, that essentially, I mean, I know some, I told this to some of you, but I shifted a lot of the things in this syllabi and or in the syllabus, and it's been really nice to see that those shifts having a really generative effect, because I think that a lot of you are. I'm really excited to move into next term, where we're going to be relying on what we've learned and talked about in this term and some of the readings, but we're going to look a little bit more directly and concretely at art production, not necessarily at the body of the artist or the life of the artist. And so don't go burning your notebooks now, um, because you're going to need this information for the rest of your life. And on that note, I'm going to say goodbye, and I'll see you at the hotel for a cocktail soon.